Welcome Year 12 to the audio recording on the theme, an introduction to the theme on deception. Um, this is the second theme that we'll be exploring, and I would recommend that you go back after this and after our study and look at and analysing the text of Hamlet in light of what you see here for all of Acts 1 through 5. Also, I'd recommend you look at each of the characters and see their role in the construction of the concept of deception and what Shakespeare has to say about this. Remembering that a theme is not just a topic, a theme is in fact an opinion on a topic. It gives you a message, it's a core idea, a core message, a core moral that the author, in this case Shakespeare, would like you to take from reading his text. And so one of those is we're exploring the topic of deception and how Shakespeare, I guess, views that. So how we're going to do that is by looking at all of the characters tied into the plot line. You can see here on the screen in front of you the characters and how, in particular, they connect to Hamlet. As we go through this, we're going to explore the different characters and not just how they connect to Hamlet in light of deception, either deceiving him or being deceived by him, but in fact how they deceive or are being deceived by many other characters as well. In fact, you will find that deception, if you step back and look at the entire play, is actually a big part of most of the relationships here, has some level of deception. There are only a few characters who remain separate from almost any form of deception. Fortinbras is one of those. He is boldly declaring that whether or not it is agreed that King Hamlet won the land that he is trying to take back fair and square, he is boldly, publicly declaring that it is not okay that that happened. It's not okay that he killed old Fortinbras, his father, the king of Norway, and he is going to invade, and he's quite boldly declaring this. So sending notes to the King Claudius and requiring King Claudius to actually reply to Norway and say, hey, please stop your nephew from doing this. So he's quite brash and quite public. He doesn't really get involved in the deception. Pretty much everybody else, however, is either a victim of or some player in the idea of deception. And that in and of itself should suggest how important Shakespeare's discussion of this is. So, because a theme is not just a topic, it is an opinion on a topic, I've put forth some possible messages that Shakespeare might have for us. That is not to say these are the only messages, and you might starkly disagree with some of these, and that's completely okay. Remembering that as long as you can prove it from the text, to the point that you might even ignore portions of the text, in an essay, in an argument, you are welcome to present an argument or a perspective that explores a theme, if themes happen to be your focus for the essay, and you can focus on an aspect that might, for example, be listed here, or one that is not, and you can ignore other portions of the text. So I have come up with 4. They are only 4 that are possible. There are many, many other messages that Shakespeare could have for us. It could be that the ends justifies the means. In light of deception, although deception is generally considered a bad thing, that deception, when used for a good end, for example, Hamlet deceiving people that he is mad and so forth, with the goal of ensuring that he avenges his father's death and doesn't kill Claudius till he's absolutely certain, seems like a good reason to be deceptive. So that could be the message. It could be all deception will eventually be revealed. This would be, for example, the Act 5, in which in the final battle scene everything's revealed. Laertes dobs in Claudius. Gertrude suddenly seems to look at Claudius and realise, oh my goodness, I see more than I thought. I not only am I dying, but I realise that you did this and you tried to kill my son, starting to realise everything that's happened. Hamlet now understands that the ghost is telling the truth. So everything is revealed in the end, and that could possibly be Shakespeare's key message here for the theme of deception. Or it could be that deception has negative outcomes, and that one is to some degree a Captain Obvious. It is overly simplistic and so probably not worthy of a Year 12 essay, but it it is one that is supported heavily in text, and you could possibly find ways of making that a little bit more complex. And then, of course, the fourth one I've got there in front of you, deception is a necessary evil, which again could possibly tie in with the first point I made about Hamlet, except that would not be deemed evil. It could be that you could argue that spying on someone like Polonius did is a wrong. It is in no way considered good to spy between a mother and a son and to be deceitful in that way. However, for the protection of a woman from potentially a son who is a bit mad, that could be considered a necessary evil. And so that deception, that could be the message that Shakespeare has for us. And it could be many, many more. So as you explore the text, ask the question of yourself, when I look at an aspect of deception, what is Shakespeare trying to tell me? What's the message he wants me to take from this theme? What's the message he wants me to take from this portion of the text? What is he trying to tell me from this character doing this or saying this? So there are three key techniques that you have to explore anything in, and I've just realised that is misspelt, so I apologise for that. Deception. That's a strange word. So the first one is through his construction of characters, who they are and what they do. The second one is the plot line, what happens and the outcome of those actions. Really importantly, the outcome of those actions is the final word. And three, dialogue, what is said, by whom and how is it said. We gain less of the how it is said when this is not performed, but we do gain a great deal from what is said, to whom it is said, and by whom it is said. So all of those factors come together to build an argument in an essay or in a discussion or in a complete analysis of any theme, any idea, any character, etc. Okay, so how, with all of that in mind, how I'm going to explore this is I'm actually not in the time that we have going to explore language choice. That one you will be doing in class as you analyse, and you'll be doing that at home. That would involve you drawing out the textual evidence that supports the conclusions you draw for the theme's message. So if you think that the means justifies the ends, the ends justify the means, you might find a quote from Hamlet explaining to the men around him that in that first act, that they must swear to be loyal because he has a duty to fulfill, which explains that it is a good thing and that he therefore must play the game at being mad in order to discover the most important outcome, which is whether or not the ghost is telling the truth and whether or not he needs to kill Claudius, avenge his father's death, and so forth. You would find the quote that supports that. I'm not going to give you those quotes here. That's something that you'll need to explore as you go through. But what I am going to focus on here is character plus character equals outcome. And I'm going to put that forth as a very clear way of exploring the concept of of deception. And what this does is this is exploring of our analysis, the what and the how in part. So it's what is Shakespeare saying about deception and how is he doing it? And in this case, he's doing it through plotline, which is the outcome of the actions of characters. And depending upon which character is interacting with which character, of course, creates a greater deception or more evil deception, etc. And then you've got their motivation and everything else, which then leads us to the why, which is what message is he trying to send. And that will depend upon which one you decide and what conclusion you draw at the end. So an example of this is character. Hamlet behaves as though he is mad to be free to explore the death of his father and the truth of the ghost's words. So Hamlet is being deceptive. He is deceiving apparently everyone around him except the few men who swore to know that they had seen the ghost and that they would not tell anyone and they would not mention that he is being mad. They are the only ones aware of this deception. So he is behaving in that way. He is deceiving everybody else. They are all the other characters. Ophelia falls for it. Polonius falls for it. Gertrude and Claudius all seem to fall for the fact that he is going mad, a little bit nutty. The outcome of this, there are many, many outcomes, but one in particular that is very crisp and clear and can be proven has a direct connection, is that with everything building Gertrude, his Hamlet's mother, finally snaps, believing that he is insane and quite concerned for him. She chooses, with wanting to have a conversation with him about how Hamlet has offended Claudius after the play. She asks for protection by having Polonius stay behind the curtain just in case anything happens, and also so that he can overhear and observe, because she's not quite sure what she will hear. She, believing that him insane, seeks that. Unfortunately, that directly leads to Polonius's death. So, Hamlet, being deceptive, can be connected to the death of Polonius. Of course, later on we're going to explore how Polonius and Gertrude being deceptive also led to Polonius's death, because they didn't tell Hamlet, no, it's not Claudius. Polonius is in the room hiding behind the curtain. So from that you might draw the conclusion, the why. Well, why has that been put there? It might be the conclusion number 3, that all deception has negative outcomes. Hamlet ruins his relationship with his mother. Polonius is killed. Gertrude is traumatized by the death of Polonius and loses a good ally and friend. So everybody in this scene has a negative outcome. It could be as well that all deception is revealed. It could be that you look at that from the perspective of, in this scene, that Hamlet's madness is revealed in the sense that it is potentially proven not to be a deception anymore at all, but truth, as he is seeing the ghost, and Gertrude is watching him see the ghost but not actually knowing what's going on. So the deception is almost unraveled at that point, because he's actually painted as genuinely insane. It could also be that Polonius is outed and Gertrude are both outed when he squeals from behind there, and of course he is revealed and killed. So there's at least two of our themes that or messages that you could conclude from that. Now, to go into this, I'm not going to go into it in as much detail as you possibly could. Going into an essay, you only need a few pieces of evidence to support a perspective. So I have given you a couple of examples all the way through with each of the key characters, and it's up to you to explore further into the analysis and the theme of deception in order to draw your own conclusions about what the message is. And of course, eventually, whether or not that is honoured in the Mel Gibson Zeffirelli version of the play in film. So our first character is Claudius. Now I've divided the screen, as you can see, into who he deceives, or who the character deceives, what the outcome of that is. Now in this case there are 2 deceptions that I've listed. There are many, many deceptions from Claudius, but I've listed 2 there. And then who he is deceived by and how his outcome can lead to you drawing a conclusion. So an example here is that he deceives Gertrude by not telling her that he has killed, or at least we believe not telling her that he killed her husband. Now that is not 100%, we're not 100% certain of that. Some people have argued that Gertrude, throughout the 400 years of this text's existence, that Gertrude does in fact know what's going on, but she does seem quite surprised when Hamlet mentions the killing of a king in the bedroom scene and the killing of Polonius, and so it does seem we tend to lean towards the fact that no, although there may have been an affair going on previous to this, it's unlikely that Gertrude knew what was going on, so it is very likely that she was deceived. What is the outcome here? She marries him and he secures the Kingdom of Denmark. Well, that completely undermines the idea that all deception has a negative outcome. Absolutely. Although if we follow the train of this deception, of course, we end up having Gertrude drinking from the cup that Claudius himself poisons, which is a form of irony, that he kills the wife that he killed to have. In order that, for example, if she had known, if he had welcomed her into the conspiracy, then she, of course, would not have drunk from the cup. So if things are carried to their final outcome, you could potentially argue that all deception will be revealed and deception has negative outcomes there. You could, however, argue for deception is a necessary evil here, because you could suggest that Gertrude and Claudius marrying is necessary for the securing of the throne and the line against Fortinbras and the coming army. And Claudius does in fact say that that was one of the reasons they married. That might suggest that in this case deception is a necessary evil, because it's unlikely that Gertrude would have married the murderer of her husband. So in that case you could potentially argue that. Then we have Laertes. He deceives Laertes. Now, this is not a pure deception. Laertes is, of course, already angry at Hamlet and is seeking to kill him anyway. However, Claudius seeks to do this in a way that will benefit him. And so, or at least Laertes might, for example, confront Hamlet and get out of killing him, because Hamlet, for example, could win him over, could return the body of Polonius, could beg his forgiveness, and all these sorts of things. So Claudius deceives Laertes, not revealing that he in fact has had an agenda the whole way along to try and get rid of Hamlet and any threat that might be to his throne, and brings Laertes on board with the secret killing of Hamlet. The problem with that is, of course, the outcome is he convinces Laertes that he is innocent and Hamlet should be killed. Hamlet, Laertes fight, but what is the outcome? All three are killed. So again, you could draw the conclusion there that the message is that all deception will be revealed, that deception has negative outcomes. Those two oversimplified messages might be the case. Then we have who is Claudius deceived by. In this case, he is at one or two moments, he is actually deceived by Hamlet himself. In sending Hamlet off to England to have him killed with a secret note to be given to the King of England by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who themselves do not know they are carrying this note, he thinks that Hamlet is on his way to do that, to be killed. But in fact, Hamlet turns the tables on him and tricks him by secretly returning. And then suddenly Claudius says, oh my goodness, Hamlet is back, but I've also lost two of my great allies, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who have been killed. So again, the conclusions you could draw from that. All deception will be revealed. Deception, because of course Hamlet then sees the note, so he changes it. So that's deception is in fact revealed. Deception is very negative outcomes for Claudius and for Rosencrantz and for Guildenstern, but not for Hamlet here. And potentially deception is a necessary evil, that Hamlet does in fact hide his return and hide this whole process and doesn't reveal about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern until much later, because he's seeking, he could expose the King Claudius at this point, but he is seeking to come back and deal with the business himself. So that then brings us to Gertrude. So I'm going to, from this point on, allow you to draw your own conclusions as to what you think might be the evidence that is supported here. The conclusions that are supported by evidence here. But who deceives Gertrude? Well, obviously we've already mentioned, who does she deceive? She deceives Hamlet by inviting him to speak to her privately, but making sure that it's not actually private, by having Polonius there. The consequences we've already discussed. Polonius is killed. She is deceived by Claudius. She is deceived by Hamlet. She marries him and, Claudius, she marries him and secures the throne. Again, multiple outcomes there we explore with Claudius. And she is also deceived by Hamlet by being convinced that he is potentially mad. So that potentially also leads to the death of Polonius and a number of other conclusions that we have already talked about. Then we have Polonius himself. So Polonius attempts to deceive Hamlet. He hides behind the curtain in Gertrude's room, which of course leads to his death. He also, in another couple of ways, tries to deceive Hamlet, which of course you'll explore more of these. There's a lot more deception throughout the play, but of course through his use of Ophelia. He also deceives his son Laertes by sending Rinaldo after him to spy on him, but of course he trusts him after giving him all this wise advice. So Polonius actually deceives a number of people. He's clearly got an agenda going on behind the scenes. Some people argue that he is in fact quite a bambling old fool. Some people have argued for that, but the evidence seems to suggest he knows there's a lot more going on, or is at very least contriving his own game throughout sort of the melee. The problem is the game is a lot bigger than him and he doesn't realise what he's walking into. He, however, is deceived by Hamlet. Hamlet convinces him at one point that he is mad and mad with love for Ophelia, which causes him to go to his king with his reputation on the line to say that he is in fact, yes, in love with my daughter, and that is why he's mad. And then, of course, his deception is exposed when Hamlet goes absolutely nuts at Ophelia and loses it. But of course, we believe that he in part goes completely nuts at Ophelia because he believes again that he is being deceived, in this case by who? Polonius, because the reaction to Ophelia, and then potentially the hearing of a sound off stage or some of her comments, he concludes at one point by asking the question, "Where is your father?" And this is in the "Get Thee to a Nunnery" scene. And so we are led to believe that at this point Hamlet starts to see through this and sees that Ophelia and Polonius, or at very least Polonius, is involved in some form of deception for him, which of course, what is the outcome there? Results in a very negative situation for Ophelia, who is degraded and humiliated as he breaks up with her and treats her very, very poorly. A number of conclusions that you can draw there for yourself on what that means for our potential for or more thematic messages and conclusions. We have Laertes. Again, Laertes is out of the plot for a lot of the story, but he deceives Hamlet by convincing him that they're going to have a fair and equal duel, and they're doing it for a bet in front of the king and the queen, and it's all just good sportsmanship, which of course he's actually laced his sword with poison to seek him, to kill him. What is the outcome? They both die. Well, I think that is an obvious deception has negative outcomes, or deception will be revealed, because he even dobs himself in. His honour will not permit him to let Hamlet die without telling him, "I did this and I'm letting you know Claudius was involved." Not to mention he suddenly realises that he's become a stooge of Claudius. Okay, he is, however, also deceived by Claudius, who, as we've already previously discussed, seeks to use Laertes as a weapon to achieve his own goals, to ensure that Hamlet is killed rather than just punished or humiliated or anything of the like. We have Ophelia. As you can see there, that is not to suggest that Ophelia never deceives anybody, but it is most definitely the evidence tends to weight towards the fact that she probably has minimal intention in it. There is an argument for the fact that she is involved in the deception of Hamlet with the ruse of the giving back of the books and the trinkets to Hamlet. She is a part of a deception, but the degree to which she is part of that deception is determined by how you view her relationship to her father. Is she simply obeying? And then, of course, Polonius says that in front of Claudius, so she is also to obey the king and do this. So the degree to which she deceives Hamlet is questionable, but she is indeed deceived by Hamlet. Whether or not, and this is the great debate which you can have in class, whether or not Hamlet actually genuinely loves Ophelia. Personally, bit of a romantic, I think he does, and I think the grave scene reveals that. Genuine grief reveals how he feels, but he does play a game with her. He either deceives her that she is loved by him and then retracts that, or he genuinely loves her and then when he is deceived, he plays games and gets involved in the deception and hurt. He says, "No, we're not in love," and so forth, and plays games with her. And then he continues to do that by mocking her publicly. So the deception relationship between Ophelia and Hamlet is rather complex and not clear-cut. It's entirely up to you what you choose to argue there and what conclusions you would draw from that. You potentially could also add to a thematic discussion here. When you look at Laertes and when you look at Ophelia as examples, you could put there that deception destroys the innocent, and that could potentially be a conclusion that Shakespeare, amongst all the others, wanted us to draw from a discussion of deception. Then we have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They are caught up in the deception of Hamlet. Now, of course, as with Ophelia, they are to a degree not really being deceptive. They are obeying their king and their queen, but they are nevertheless involved in three major deceptions of Hamlet, of which in the end causes Hamlet to feel very isolated. He's lost all his friends, all his family, because he sees right through it and spots immediately that they were sent by the queen or by the king. And then he notes that says, well, of course, or even my friends are now against me. So he feels completely isolated. They are also deceived by Claudius themselves. So they deceive and are deceived by Claudius because they don't know that they are taking the message to England to have Hamlet killed. He is one of their friends. They may or may not have done it, or had they known, or they may have willingly been involved in the conspiracy. But either way, it ends with their death. So again, you can draw conclusions from that outcome of the deception. Now, Hamlet himself. I could go for quite a fair bit longer here with the different layers of deception. Um, there is, starting with the one we've just mentioned, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, perhaps as a revenge or perhaps never meaning to be vengeful. But of course, if he hadn't written in the letter, it wouldn't be vengeful. So it does seem very vengeful that he replants the letter on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern with their names in place for them to be killed. So he does turn around and deceive them. There is argument for the fact that he deceives his mother Gertrude with the madness, and of course everybody else. That he deceives Ophelia. That that with his madness, there is some people even argue that he deceives himself. That he is not even aware that he has gone mad. Then we have, who is he being deceived by? We do have the Polonius scene in and Gertrude scene when they're behind the curtain. He is deceived, which results in him killing someone, which is the final domino that leads to the fight between Laertes and Hamlet, which leads to his death, of course. We have Polonius getting Ophelia involved, making him far more isolated, because now not only is his mother and his stepfather against him, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, everybody's turning him. He's now isolated by the woman he loves or potentially was pretending to love. So he is completely isolated with this outcome. He is also potentially, depending on how you view it, deceived by the ghost. He isn't deceived because we know that the ghost tells the truth, because we've got audience knowledge that happened, but we of course don't know the role of the ghost in its agenda, whether it's good or bad. But he feels as though he might be getting deceived, so that plays into the final comment I wanted to make. Out of the concept of deception comes the concept that Hamlet, in particular, of all the other characters, don't quite know, caught in the web of deception, what they should do. Deception leads to uncertainty, an inability to make final conclusions, to draw conclusions and to act upon them. Now let's think about this. This story is three sons: Hamlet, Laertes, and Fortinbras. They are all sons of now dead fathers. Their fathers were all killed in what they deem by their sons to be acts that require vengeance or recompense or some form of justice. They all have some form of duty to that act. Fortinbras immediately acts upon it and is not stopped in his action until he completes his task. Laertes seeks to act but gets caught in a deception which leads to his own death, and Hamlet does not know what to do. He spends almost the entire play not acting and deciding whether or not to act until the very final scene, when all the deception is of course revealed, and then he completely overreacts by stabbing and poisoning Claudius. So what we have then is, through all of this deception, we can see that Fortinbras is free from deception and is able to achieve his goals. He acts. We have Laertes, who is minimally caught in the deception. He's really only caught in one major deception, but unfortunately that's enough to bring him down, but it doesn't steal his integrity. He's able in the end to still firstly achieve the vengeance for his father and to reveal and apologise to Hamlet for being involved in the deception. But then we have Hamlet. From the word go, Hamlet is caught in the web of deception. He is unable to extract himself. Everybody is at some level involved, even if they are innocently, forcefully involved in the deception around Hamlet, and even the supernatural world is involved in this deception. When even the world beyond the physical is causing you to doubt your own mind, to be uncertain as to whether or not you should act, as you can see from the questions in front of here, which I'll allow you to read, Hamlet is left with this battle of what to do. And as a consequence, at multiple moments in the play, right at the beginning when he's told to act, his first decision is, I need to find out more. So he gets involved in deception of his own. I'm going to act mad. I'm going to set up a play to see if Claudius is right. He doesn't act. Then he waits when he sees Claudius, who openly admits, yes, whilst praying, he potentially doesn't hear the prayer, but what's important is he does not act, now aware that Claudius is in fact guilty. He chooses not to act. Why? Because he does not want him to go to heaven. He is yet again trapped by indecision. What if I send him to heaven? What if this is all true and my father, as he believes, has in fact told him, but he's not certain because he's a ghost, has to walk the earth bearing all of his sin? That just seems so unfair and so unjust. Um, and then he doesn't even act when he first returns, knowing that Claudius tried to kill him. He still doesn't act immediately. He gets involved in this whole deception. In this case, he's being deceived. Oh yes, I'll play out this whole scenario of the sword fight and so forth. Even though we have a very clear quote about fate where he goes on to suggest that perhaps he does know that it's all going to end poorly when he says, well, if it not be now, it be later, and if it be later, it not be now, and so forth, and if it not be later, it be now, something like that. He explores the idea that everything has led to this moment. Doesn't matter what has come before, deception or not, I must go and battle this, I must go fight, and the outcome will be the outcome. But he doesn't act. He's still going, well, fate will determine everything. So he still is trapped in his uncertainty as to what to do. So the outcome here for all of these, I want you to remember at the end of this, is that all the characters are acting. Character is acting against character, or is being acted upon by another character. So character plus character equals an outcome, and that is the plot line, which leads Shakespeare to give us a message, a conclusion you can draw. Finally, just consider, for those of you who want to look a little bit deeper into this idea, deception also leads to the subplot here throughout the entire play of our three sons. One who is not caught in deception acts immediately. One is caught, that was Fortinbras. Laertes, when he is an honourable man, he is seeking, for the most part he's honourable, he is seeking to avenge his father, and so he charges forward, but is caught in the web set up by Claudius, and which leads to his end, but is still able to achieve his goal. And Hamlet, who is completely trapped and completely destroyed, his entire family, his entire nation, he himself, everything about him is destroyed in the end. The only thing that remains is his friendship to Horatio, who he asks, please do not kill yourself, please live to tell the story of me, so that this whole deception will be exposed, which he will go on to tell Fortinbras. So that is the introduction to deception. There is so much more throughout the play, and I hope that you will reread or listen to the audiobook in light of this theme, looking for the conclusions that are drawn from that. So do take the time to go back over everything, listen to this perhaps a few times, and all the best with your analysis.